Assemblyman Jim Brennan, thank you for joining us. As this legislative session winds down, what is your top priority specifically in terms of transportation infrastructure?
Well, our top priority as chair of the Committee on Corporations, Authorities, and Commissions is the overhaul of the Port Authority and its decision-making processes and its transparency. Related to Bridgegate and the huge toll increases of the past few years, there have been calls to apply what is called the Public Authority Reform Act to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So my office has been working, sponsors a bill to apply the Public Authority Reform Act to the Port Authority. And what that does is require all the trustees to have a fiduciary duty of loyalty and care to the mission of the agency, which of course would relate to someone in the Bridgegate scandal would have an obligation to not create such havoc. That would be their duty as a member of the board or as a top officer. And so in that legislation there is also a duty to report corruption and conflicts of interest, to create an inspector general, to create a whistleblowers, to have transparency in their budgets, and to disclose more information, especially when there might be a toll hike upcoming and how much debt they may be going into, and other things of great public concern. And also to assure that their decision-making processes, there's greater public notice and more disclosure in the minutes about how the decisions are being made and things of that nature. So to change the laws of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, you have to get an identical law passed in all four legislative bodies of both states, the Assembly and the Senate in New York and the Assembly and the Senate in New Jersey, as well as both governors sign the same thing, all four legislative bodies. So I'm working with an Assembly member and a senator from the New Jersey legislature, as well as Senator Golden here in New York State Senate, and we are very close to a final agreement on an identical piece of legislation that does the things that I mentioned there to apply Public Authority Reform Act and a more open and more transparent process and more accountable process for the Port Authority to make its decisions with the public interest in mind, and also to deal with the problems involved with partisanship between the two states and a sort of misdirection in relation to New Jersey doing one thing and New York doing something else, and them not cooperating with each other or concealing information between each other. And so every year the Port Authority trustees will have to do an open report on interstate cooperation. So we're almost done. We anticipate having identical pieces of legislation in the coming week or two, and then my goal will be to get the State Assembly to complete that legislation here, pass it. A similar bill has passed the State Assembly twice already, in 2012 and 2013. A similar bill was vetoed by Governor Christie in 2012 after the toll hike. So that's going to be our top priority.
So you've had support in the Assembly before. Do you have other Assembly members that are willing to sign on to this, and as well as other senators, have they expressed interest in supporting this bill? And then the same in New Jersey. What kind of support is there in that state house?
Yes, our bill, a very similar bill, is sponsored by myself and co-sponsored by many other members of the Assembly, and has passed the Assembly twice in the past 2 years. A similar bill has passed the New Jersey legislature in 2012. And so it's our belief that there'll be broad support. Our bill has passed out of the Corporations Committee 3 times and discussed it with the Ways and Means chairperson and the leadership in the Assembly. And Senator Golden and Senator Ranzenhofer are working on this in the New York State Senate. They're familiar with it, and we've worked with them to get it in shape. So and the New Jersey legislators as well, passed New Jersey legislature in 2012. And so I think the time is right to do a overhaul of the decision-making processes of the Port Authority to get them transparent and open. We're not telling the Port Authority what to do, but to make sure that there's more integrity in their decision-making process and more public information in relation to the time when they're going to make a decision. And so I'm optimistic that this can be accomplished.
When we're talking about the Port Authority, is the biggest issue the fact that it is by state, that there are two legislatures to answer to, two different sets of appointees? I mean, is that the biggest issue that creates problems within the Port Authority in terms of, being open, in terms of other things like that?
Well, I think that the laws that govern the Port Authority have made it insular in its nature, and yes, the fact that that both states have to oversee it, and each governor has a veto power, and so they tend to be very insular, is certainly a major problem. Having an annual report on interstate cooperation, having a duty to report corruption, having a whistleblower policy, having a code of ethics and financial disclosure, conflicts of interest policy, things that are not currently law, but which will direct the Port Authority's processes to be more open and clearer, will be very helpful. And in relation to the toll hike, for instance, there'll be much more information about how much money they plan to borrow and what their budget will be, so that things like that will be known way in advance. The public got 2 weeks' notice last time in 2011, and so hopefully that won't happen again.
Assemblymember Jim Brennan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to speak with you.